Thanks so much for having me. It's a huge honor to follow such a distinguished bunch of mostly Bathonians. I'm not from Bath. Some of maybe got that. I actually came to the UK about 20 years ago, and I reported to my new job on a Monday morning, and I met my first colleague called Arabella. At least that's how I called her then. I know better now. It's Arabella. So Arabella and I had a little chat, and she said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Brazil." And she burst out laughing, and I said, "No, Joy." She said, "No, Joy, you're American. You know, where are you really from?" And I was 24 years old, and as a sort of adult at 24, I had what was a genuine sort of identity crisis in that very moment. And you have to understand, at 24, it was the first time anyone had actually called me an American. Up until then, true story, by the way, up until then, I was an immigrant in the US. So really, I'm from a lot of places. I was born in Rio. That's a genuine story. Raised there. My father lived there until he died. And I really identified very strongly with being a Brazilian. My parents are from Argentina, so I grew up speaking Spanish and Portuguese. So I also really identified very strongly with Argentina. My grandparents are all European, confusingly. So there were 4 languages sort of running around in the family. Dutch, Italian, a few other things floating around. I was educated in San Francisco, and I have this accent because of that. And I lived there for many years. And I've made London and the suburbs of London my home for nearly 20 years now. So a bit of a confused story there. So identity and place identity really, really fascinates me, and that's the short history of why. And that moment with Arabella of calling me an American was specifically special. Now, those photographs I put up on purpose to sort of say they're really incredible cities, and I'm super fortunate to have experienced those cities. But that's not how I experienced them. It looked a little bit more like this in my life. Dance, laugh, and have fun. If you've ever been to Rio, that's how you feel about that city. Beef-eating macho man. My parents will not be happy about that description, but that's how I feel about Argentina. Sorry, folks, if you're Argentine. Art and culture for Europe. Technology, pioneering spirit for San Francisco. Creativity, diversity, open for business for London. So identity and culture of places really fascinates me, and it's sort of led me to asking quite a few questions throughout my career. So I want to ask you a question now. If someone's a cheeseball romantic and they want to propose to somebody, you take them to the city of love. What's the city of love? Paris. Super easy, falling off a log. You want to go and be naughty? Like, you're going to go to Sin City. Where's Sin City? Vegas. The city that never sleeps? New York. So we all have these relationships which aren't really architectural in nature. They're more emotional and human. We give them human characteristics, which is super interesting. There they are, City of Love, the naughty city, and New York, of course. So the question I always ask then is, can we affect how people feel about a place? And perhaps more importantly, at the beginning of when we start creating pockets of cities, can we actually create places that have meaning and, more importantly, purpose? And that word has been used so much today. It's actually my favorite word. I really enjoy the idea that we can actually start to think about places with purpose. I would say the answer to that is yes, absolutely. We have not just the ability, but an opportunity and even bigger, a responsibility to really carefully shape our bits of city when we have an opportunity to affect them. I say carefully for 2 reasons. One is, if we do it right and we do it well, we can create a competitive advantage. So I am American, and I do believe that profit is okay. The other thing, though, is this responsibility, and I think it's a really, really important one, and that is to avoid monoculture. This is what I think monoculture looks like. You know, we spend a lot of time blaming Amazon and various other online shops for making us buy online, and then we don't visit the high street, or we don't go to places like this. By the way, if you're dropped out of an airplane into a shopping strip mall in America, anywhere, it looks like this. Like this could be any state in America right now. And really, I would much prefer to sit on my sofa on a Saturday than to get in the car, pay for parking, or do whatever, and go to a place like this. I don't know about you. So we can't really blame, I think, online shopping. We have to rethink what the purpose is of our high streets, of our shopping malls. So they're not helping themselves. Now, does anyone here work in the urban environment and architecture world? Have you ever come across the word placemaking? Yeah, lots of nodding. So there is this word, placemaking, right? And that's like the panacea and solution to everything that is in place creation. And I kind of don't like that word so much for a couple of reasons. The first is, placemaking really started in an era of real grassroots movements and activities to reclaim public realm for communities, and that's a very noble cause. So I quite like that placemaking stays that sort of noble thing. And what we've started to do really is borrow placemaking as a slightly cynical way to kind of, cozy up some of our developments and scary big commercial developments. And I think let's leave placemaking into the notion of creating wonderful community spaces for human beings, and maybe rethink how we're using that in development speak. So for me, the word placemaking, probably the first piece that I would love to dismantle, is that it's about making. So what you end up with is rushing into, hey, we've got a new development over here, we're building some stuff, we're building a piece of city, let's do some placemaking, what shall we make? And you're running really quickly into the making answer. So if you are just doing some making, how do you know what to make? What's the measuring stick that you're going to use for your placemaking? And often, and I work with a lot of developers who are enlightened and fantastic, many of them, as well as city councillors, etc. And the enlightened ones sort of really think about this idea of what comes before placemaking, and needing to know sort of the measure of how you make it. But the unenlightened ones sort of do this. They say, hey, you know what, we've got this massive multi-billion-pound development. We need to do some placemaking. Hey, Joy, what do we do? Let's do some placemaking. Shall we stick in I tell you what, let's shove in a farmer's market. And, in the summer, let's put a screen up so people can watch, live sports and stuff. And hey, that's community making. Done. Tick, 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 tick. And I always go, oh, okay, why? And I think for me, the big question is, when we say let's do some placemaking, we need to ask ourselves more regularly, why are we doing that activity? What are we doing? And what is it for? And more importantly, who is it for? I want to offer a new term for our lexicon, and it's place purpose. And I think if we do great bits of city, we will consider place purpose long before we consider our architecture, and long before we have to add some patchwork quilt of placemaking. But rather we would have a measuring stick in place purpose that gives a rationale to our placemaking. So here's my little definition. I define place purpose as the intentional reason a place exists based on human-centered needs. And the key in that sentence is human-centered needs, really importantly. So a developer might say, hey, I'm only making this place to make some profit. I'll tell you, if you need to market that place later on to try and get an occupier or a tenant or sell a flat, if you go up to them and say, hey, I made this in order to make profit, it creates zero resonance. That is not going to motivate me to make a sale. So the thing I want to sort of propose is that place purpose can do two things. One is it can make you much more commercially viable because you're thinking about the human beings that you're actually building for. And the other is you can just do good stuff for your city. So if you want to illuminate the future of Bath or of any city, we should be putting human needs at the center of our city making. This is a bit of a quirky example, I will say, but it's a lot easier to do the lateral than to speak necessarily specifically about developments. This is Walt Disney, and he had a terrific idea, basically, which was people want to meet Mickey Mouse. So he thought, gosh, if I create a place where people can meet Mickey Mouse, I have to make sure that it doesn't destroy their illusion of who Mickey Mouse is. So what is this place going to be about? Well, of course, he created the magical kingdom. So everything through that lens, that very clear purpose, had to be about creating magic. He wasn't talking about rides and make the rides bigger, make the rides faster. He was talking about magic. So he invented, as part of that, loads of different things. He invented a rubbish bin where you wouldn't have smell coming out because it just had this thing that would flip back and forth when you shoved your rubbish in. Later on, the rubbish then started to dispose itself underground, so you would never have that illusion of needing to even empty out the bin. Probably most importantly, he put all the stage management underground, so you never saw Mickey taking his head off. Because nothing is going to not only destroy your illusion, but probably scar you for life if you're a child watching Mickey remove his head. So he really understood his place purpose for Disneyland, and boy, did he stitch that into absolutely everything that he made there. The making came later. I wouldn't call Disneyland a theme park. I think it's a different thing. But every other theme park, I would say, anywhere across the world is missing a purpose other than bigger, faster, etc. Bigger, faster, is there anything else? I think that's it. So, really fast, I'm going to hammer through 7 things that I think are key factors to creating great places and to creating change in our cities. The first is speak to the people. Let's ask what they need. Today, we've had the most tremendous number of fantastically purposeful conversations around mental health, around children's imaginations. How can we start really speaking to the people and saying, what are the things that will fundamentally change the way you work, the way you're educated, the way you live? What are your problems in your sort of day-to-day family that we can start to resolve? Speaking to the people and then building our cities, so relevant. The second proposition is, be committed to doing some good. And I think this, now more than ever, is a big motivator. No one's used the millennial word today, which I thought was kind of a relief, actually. It's been used probably too much, but I'm going to use it. And the big thing with millennials is they're really motivated by doing good. They kind of are sort of like okay with working for a business earning $5,000 less than they would over there for a company that actually does some good. So can we sort of stitch real good into our bits of developments and city making? The third, of course, is having that, from that research, from a commitment to doing some good, define your place purpose for the bit that you're creating, the bit of city you're creating. From there, every decision you make is done through the lens of the purpose of the place you're trying to create. What am I trying to do here? And are my actions commensurate with what I'm trying to achieve? And then do it. So, a marketeer is telling you, please don't just put a pretty strapline of purpose and then walk away, but actually be committed to doing stuff. So this is about buildings and sections of city starting to have an operational model that commits itself to its place purpose and authentically doing things that then prove that place purpose is a reality. Collaboration. The built environment architectural industry is extremely siloed. So we have town planners, architects, landscape architects, marketeers, lots of different people who get briefs, but they don't necessarily collaborate with one another. If you have a place purpose in the middle of the table, everybody feeds that place purpose. If you don't, everybody fights for a bit more of the budget for the overall place. The landscape architect shouldn't have as much as I have, et cetera, et cetera. But it really changes working groups if we put a place purpose in the middle that everyone is contributing towards. but not at the sake of leadership, because I would say the other problem is with a lot of big place projects is no, there's no leader. It's so democratic that everybody has a say. But at the end of the day, someone needs to say, nope, this is our purpose, this is the direction we're going in, that's the way we go. And lastly, commitment for the long term. For me, purpose is not just putting a heart in the middle of a master plan or a strapline on a hoarding. It's something that you commit to for decades, and that's where we get a lot of success. So in summary, do good people-based research, commit to doing good, have a place purpose, act authentically, collaborate, have a leader, and be committed. Thank you.